Welcome to the lectures on free will. This is part 1 of 5. And, we want to ask, do we have free will? And, we can take this guy here as, an example. It looks like he could go left. It looks like he could go right. Maybe, those aren't the only two options. He could just walk straight ahead. He could high five the sign. He could make grass angels. He can throw the contents of his briefcase all over the ground. Whatever he wants to do, right? It's open to him, or so it seems. But, if we pulled back the curtain of reality or looked into the nature of things, should we really say that he has free will? For one thing, we might think there's actually, although it appears to him that he has multiple options, there's actually only one option available for him, and say that's going left, right? Well, even if there's only one option available for him, we can still ask, is he free in going left? Okay, so what are we going to cover in this section on free will? We'll look at some preliminary considerations where we'll consider various theories on free will. We'll look at 2 arguments for incompatibilism. Incompatibilism is a view on the relationship between determinism and freedom. We'll look at Chisholm's libertarian view, his view that we're free in some robust sense. Hume's compatibilism. Compatibilism is a claim about the relationship between free will and determinism, and we'll lay that out in a future lecture. And then finally, Harry Frankfurt's argument for compatibilism. So the main questions in the free will debate are as follows. Is determinism true? Is determinism compatible with free will? Do we have free will? And if determinism is true, are we morally responsible for our actions? Well, determinism, what is that? We'll get into it on another slide, but basically it's the view that every single one of our actions is determined by factors outside of our control. You can say that they're elected for us or something, that they're that they're fated to occur. Those are ways of saying it in addition to that they're the claim that they're determined, right? So is this true that all of your actions are determined by factors outside of your control? We'll ask that. We'll look into that issue. Is determinism compatible with free will? Even if all of your actions are determined by factors outside of your control, maybe you're still free in your actions. How does that make sense? Well, we'll investigate that when we look at the view called compatibilism. Do we have free will? This is a question with real import because it asks not just hypothetically, but for us, whether we do make free choices. And finally, if determinism is true, are we morally responsible for our actions? So isn't it intuitively, it seems right intuitively that we're only responsible for those actions that we, had some level of control over? So that if someone holds a gun to our heads and tells us to rob a bank, then we can't be held responsible, or at least not as responsible for robbing the bank. So if all of our actions are determined by factors outside of our control, how can we be held more accountable for those actions, either legally or morally? So that's another question in the free will debate. So what is determinism? In James Rachel's article, I think it's called The Case Against Free Will, he goes into all of these issues. So this slide is based off of that article. And he defines determinism as follows. All of our actions are determined by factors outside of our control. In other words, the future is fixed. The future is fixed. What does that mean? That there's no way that the future is going to change. The future is going to roll out according to some, predetermined plan. And I don't mean to imply some sort of deity or something when I say predetermined plan. I just mean to say that there's only one single outcome for the universe, which includes every single one of your actions that you will take. So what are some of the factors, the determining factors? James Rachels lists a bunch of them. One determining factor is physical or causal. So the idea is that given the laws of nature and some random past state of the universe, if you just had the laws of nature plus the past state of the universe, that everything would roll out according to that as a consequence of those two things, and that there's only one possible future for the universe. So think of it like a movie, right? Like when you watch a movie a second time, it's not the case that the hero lives in one viewing and dies in another viewing, unless you have something like an alternate ending that you can watch. So the movie's going to roll out the same way every time, and you're not going to be surprised unless you missed something the first time with what happens in the movie. In the same way, if you could, so to speak, roll back time and let it play out again, there would be no surprises. Everything would play out in the exact same way again, given the laws of nature and the past state of the universe. And many scientists and philosophers assume that the universe is like this. It's just like a machine, a mechanical machine. You're a part of that machine. You're a cog in the machine. And that the universe is deterministic. Psychological factors might determine your actions. So, for example, the impact of the unconscious on your conscious decisions. Rachels talks about this at sort of Freudian, and maybe there is some role that the unconscious plays on your conscious choices without you realizing it, or the role of conditioning, that the role that conditioning plays in our decisions. Maybe behaviorism, Skinner, right? So that you've been conditioned to act a certain way and you act in that way unsurprisingly, but you don't realize that you only act that way because you were conditioned to act that way. So, for example, like experiments that are done on pigeons, where if they raise their head above a certain level, then they're given food, and they quickly are conditioned to keep their head above that level, and then the food just keeps coming. So I don't know how much conditioning plays in our decisions, but certainly it's a factor. And does that mean that our actions therefore are outside of our control in some way because of the conditioning, or the way that any human would act in a given circumstance, right? So maybe like there's this human nature, and that humans just act in certain ways given certain external circumstances, right? So like, with genocide, what determines whether you would be a committer of genocide or a victim of genocide is largely circumstance. For those people who study genocide, sociologists or whatever, this is what they find, that there aren't some like human beings who are just moral monsters and other human beings who are virtuous, and only the moral monsters would commit genocide. No, it's like ordinary people like you and me who commit genocide, or who are victims of genocide. It's just dependent on the circumstance that you find yourself in. Now, of course, there are exceptions, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by Hitler because he tried to, assassinate Hitler. So he didn't just go with the flow, so to speak. But many people did. Ordinary people, doctors, lawyers, mechanics, and etc. So then there are biological factors that may determine our actions, like our genetics, and this is seen fairly clearly with studies of identical twins that have been separated, but then who are brought together and studied. So in the James Rachels article, he discusses a number of these where twins who were separated at birth and didn't know about each other acted in many of the same ways when they were brought together, like wearing similar clothes, having certain mannerisms, even using certain peculiar words that they invented themselves independently of each other, and the words just happened to match when they got together. So DNA looks like it's a strong influence in the way we behave. Theological determining factors like God's foreknowledge or God's decree. So here's a question. If God knows in advance what you're going to do, how can you avoid that action? So if God knows in advance that tomorrow you're going to make a ham sandwich, it seems like there's no way around it. You're going to make that ham sandwich because God can't be wrong about what he knows, right? God is infallible. So, right. So does God's mere knowledge of the future determine all of your actions? Or God's decree? This is even stronger. It's not just that God maybe knows the future, but that God decrees or commands that certain actions will take place. It's part of his, or preordained plan that you would make a ham sandwich tomorrow. If that's so, that God commanded it, God decreed it, God predetermined it, well, then you're going to make that ham sandwich. There's no way around it. And so given this, like, do we have free will, right? Or logical determinism, that the truth in the past about a statement in the future determines the future. So Aristotle talked about a sea battle. If it's true yesterday that a sea battle will occur tomorrow, can the sea battle be avoided? Because the past can't be changed, and it was true in the past. So the fact that it's true in the past that 2 days from then there will be a sea battle, then it seems like since you can't change the past, you can't change the future, that the sea battle is going to occur. At any rate, you might ask, how many of these factors actually determine our actions? What do they mean for our freedom? Even if our actions are completely determined, might we still be free? Right? And so there are various takes on this. There are views on the relationship between free will and determinism. One, there's incompatibilism, which says that free will and determinism are not compatible with each other. So if determinism is true, then we're not free. On the other hand, if we are free, then determinism is not true. So it's like saying that they can't both be right at the same time. And there are two incompatibilist theories that we'll discuss: hard determinism and libertarianism. Hard determinism is the claim that determinism is true and therefore we're not free. So hard determinism embraces incompatibilism, which says that free will and determinism are not compatible. And then they say that we are in fact determined and therefore we're not free. Whereas the libertarian embraces incompatibilism, and it says that we're free, therefore our actions are not determined, right? Or at least we're free in some of our actions, and therefore those actions in which we're free are not determined. So hard determinists and libertarians, they're both incompatibilists, but they have different commitments when it comes to whether determinism is true or whether it's true that we have free will. The hard determinist says determinism is true. The libertarian says we have free will. And they both agree that freedom and determinism are incompatible. So, here you have Dirk Pereboom, he says that determinism is true and thus we do not have free will. So you got this poor person here. It looks like there are three options available for this person, but actually this option is not a real option. This option is not a real option. There's only one future for this individual. Since there's only one future, then this individual is not free, right? So the future is determined. It's all going to roll out according to one specific, course, and therefore this person must go along that course and therefore is not free. So that's a view that's not held by many people, hard determinism, but we've got good old Dirk here. He holds to it, Professor Pereboom. Should probably be more respectful. And then libertarianism. You've got let's say good old Roderick Chisholm here, right? And according to Roderick Chisholm, yeah, free will and determinism are not compatible, but in fact we have free will. Okay, so for this given course of action here, the individual, or given choice, given crossroads, this individual can go this way, through the middle, or this way. Since all these are open to this individual, none of them are cut off from the individual is free. And here is a quote from Chisholm. The actual world, the SEP, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The claim is that the actual world is not deterministic and that at least some of the agents in the actual world have free will. Okay, in sum, the incompatibilists, they all agree that free will and determinism are incompatible with each other. The hard determinists deny freedom and embrace determinism. The libertarians deny determinism and embrace free will. So libertarians and hard determinists define freedom in terms of the possibility of doing other than what one actually did. So for example, to make a sandwich or to refrain from making a sandwich. This is why they think that determinism and free will are not compatible with each other, right? Because they believe that freedom requires the possibility of doing other than what you actually did. So suppose that today you made a ham sandwich. If you were truly free in that action, says the libertarian and the hard determinist, then you could have refrained from making the ham sandwich. You could have made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or you could have gone without eating, or whatever. So in order to be free, you have to have multiple options available to you. And since determinism says that you only have one option available to you, one future, then determinism and freedom are not compatible. So compatibilism is a view about the relationship of free will and determinism, which says that even if determinism is true, we can still be free. So on the supposition that determinism is true, this doesn't rule out freedom. So this person here, even if these three options of the three given options, two are not available to the person, and there's only one future for this person, she might still be free, right? So the compatibilists say, as opposed to the incompatibilists, the compatibilists say determinism and free will are logically compatible with each other. And then within that camp of compatibilists, you have soft determinists. They say that determinism is true and we have free will. So it takes it from the hypothetical. Compatibilism is at the level of hypothetical, whereas soft determinism is at the level of what's actual. It's actually true that we're determined, and it's actually true that we're free. So David Hume right here and Thomas Hobbes, they both were compatibilists. They believed that determinism and free will were compatible with each other. And they believe this because they have their specific definition of free will. So compatibilists and soft determinists, they define free will in a way that's consistent with determinism, right? So they define free will in a way that's consistent with determinism. For example, they might say to be free is to be able to choose a course of action without being coerced from the outside, like without being held at gunpoint, for example. So even if your actions are determined by the past state of the universe plus the laws of nature, that doesn't mean that you didn't choose your particular course of action, right? Like you exercised your will to carry out that course of action, even if your will was determined by past factors. So this part of the distinction between part of where like the compatibilists and the incompatibilists separate ways, go their separate ways, is that they define free will in different ways. So the incompatibilist assumes that in order to be free, you have to be able to do otherwise than what you actually did. Whereas the compatibilist says that in order to be free, you just need to be able to choose a course of action without being coerced. Not held at gunpoint, not having your family members held for ransom. So they have different conceptions of freedom, and so they draw different conclusions regarding the relationship between determinism and free will. All right, so in part 2, we will discuss some arguments for incompatibilism.